Joanna's just given you a very good overview of the issues at the level of the university sector as a whole between the UK and India. I'm going to cover some of the same issues, but from the perspective of one very large university. So, as you can see, I'm Deputy President of the University of Manchester. We are the largest campus-based university in the UK, and we have the largest in absolute terms number of overseas students at our university. So, out of just short of 40,000 students on my campus, about 9,000 are from outside Europe. Indian students are the second biggest constituency within that 9,000. So the biggest group is the 2,500 Chinese students. The next biggest group is 700 students from India in the University of Manchester. So that's a pretty sizable number of Indian students, a large part of the overall body of Indian students that are in the UK. To give a couple of points of comparison, I think in Cambridge there are about 200. In the last figures that I saw. So we are together with Nottingham, the number one universities in the UK for the absolute numbers of Indian students. So from my point of view, Indian students are an important contributor to the academic health of my university. They provide an enormous source of talented students at all levels, and you'll see some numbers in a moment about how that works out in between the different categories of students. We also collaborate with Indian institutions. To cut to the chase, the bottom line is that collaboration between my university and academic researchers in India is overwhelmingly with Indian research institutes and with private sector organisations or with foundations such as the Tata Foundation, and it's not primarily with universities. And that fundamentally reflects the fact that the elite research capability in India is in those institutes, the Indian Institutes of Technology, the Indian Institute of Science, the Indian Institute of Chemical Biology, and so on and so forth. And so we have a number of projects through the UK EARI scheme that Joanna just referred to, but they are not with universities, they are with those institutes. That reflects the state of play on the ground in terms of where the mutual benefits and opportunities lie for those kinds of collaborative research projects. I think that is a symptom of some of the difficulties that have already been referred to with the Indian UK system, the Indian higher education system as a whole. So let me move on. What are the issues for an Indian higher education system? And I make no apology for offering this as a kind of theoretical analysis about which would apply to many countries, but which I think applies to the Indian HE system in broad terms. First of all, and Joanna I think just covered this, there's the issue of capacity building in volume. The participation rate at the moment in higher education is about 15% in India, which compares with 45% as the OECD average and the position in the US and the UK at the moment. So the aspiration that you saw on Joanna's previous slides to raise the participation rate to about 30% is clearly an extremely sensible and appropriate ambition for the Indian higher education system. Then there's capacity building in quality as opposed to in quantity. And the Indian government recently has itself said that it is not content with the situation where there is no Indian university ranked in the top 200 universities in the world in the Shanghai Jiaotong Index, which is the index which is the most appropriate one for measuring research power. Capacity building in international connectedness is the next issue. And when you look at universities across the world, one of the interesting facts is that publication, which is the essential output along with people of universities, is increasingly a collaborative act, and the share of all research publications which are jointly authored by academics in more than one country is continuing to grow as a secular trend. In my own institution, 30% of all of our research publications are not published just by a researcher in the University of Manchester, but by a researcher in Manchester collaborating with a researcher from another country. The co-citation or co-publication rates in India are extremely low by comparison with international averages. So clearly the collaborative nature of even the best universities in India, in terms of their international collaboration, still has enormous room for development. And in terms of connections to local and international industry, I have less direct knowledge of that, but my hunch would be that the Indian higher education research muscle is not yet as well connected as it could be to international industry, although it may well be very connected to some of those companies that we saw in the earlier slides, in the earlier session this morning, about those household names that have successfully established themselves in India. And indeed I do know that companies with which I have some direct connections, such as for example AstraZeneca in Bangalore, do make extensive use of Indian academic expertise because they have found the right way to embed themselves, but it's not straightforward. If these problems of capacity building in volume, in quality and in connectedness were to be improved, then that would, I suggest, lead to enormous benefits in direct value to the Indian economy and of course to all of its partners, and we heard earlier that Britain and indeed Belgium are important components of that international partnership. How can the UK higher education system contribute to that? Well, as I said a moment ago, there are three ways that the UK higher education system can connect directly with the Indian higher education system. The first and most obvious I've referred to, and it is through Indian students studying abroad in the UK, or indeed in even greater numbers in the US, which they do, and then returning to India and building capacity and building connectedness. Secondly, and until recently this has been a completely impassable regulatory obstacle, but now the door is beginning to be opened a bit. Foreign universities could, if they wish to, open branches in India, and that issue is now on the table in a way that it was not before. I should hasten to add that at the present time my own university is not looking to open a campus in India, but we would never rule anything out in the future. But at the present time that doesn't meet with our immediate strategic objectives. But we do, however, have ambitions to engage in transnational education in India, and I will in a moment give an example of how we have developed some extremely effective, and the first speaker in this afternoon in this session did mention the role of technology in providing higher education. We have developed an extremely effective business model for blended learning using the internet and face-to-face teaching in combination to deliver degrees all around the world, which are in fact Manchester degrees. Research partnerships are of course the other immediate way that connections can be made between the two higher education systems, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. So, how long? Very quick. So I've already said that we have India as the second largest group of students in my own university from outside the UK. I would echo entirely Joanna's comments about the visa issue. If I just flick quickly to the next slide, you'll see the way that particularly the red line, which is the one-year master's programs, the intake, these are the numbers for intakes of students from India into the University of Manchester over the last few years, and you'll see that when the visa problems, both real and perceived, began in 2010, although our undergraduate numbers continued to grow, our postgraduate numbers started to fall, and that was entirely because of the real phenomenon that the post-study work visa for postgraduate students was taken away, and the perceived problem, which of course is wrong, as Joanna says, but that means you can't work at all if you do a master's degree in England. Of course you can work if you do a master's degree in England. What you have to do is get a job. And if you get a job, then you can get a visa. But what you have to do is get that job while you are still a student in England, get that secured, and then proceed from there to a visa through the normal route that any other non-UK national would use to get a job. But you can see that these problems with perception as well as with reality have had an effect. I mentioned a transnational education model. My business school, Manchester Business School, has an offshoot called Manchester Business School Worldwide. We teach an MBA course, and we have 3,000 students on this course at the present time, many more than we have in Manchester. They're paying a very similar fee to the fee they would pay if they came to Manchester, but of course they don't have the living costs They don't have to actually lose the earnings. And the way it works is that we have offices in Singapore, in Shanghai, in Dubai, in Hong Kong, in Miami, in many other places. The students fly into those destinations from their local geographies. They have face-to-face teaching for 1 week modules. Our professors fly out to those locations. The rest of the course and all of the interaction between the students is done through the internet. We did look, and this is the point, I think, we did look carefully last year at whether we might do something in India using this same model. For the moment, we've taken a step back because it's quite daunting to overcome some of the hurdles that we would have to overcome. Finally, on research collaboration, I mentioned our participation in the scheme which Joanna referred to, the UK ARI scheme. We found this a very useful scheme. We've got several projects in place, and as I said, they're all with IITs or IISs or with Tata foundations. So I think my summary, my kind of cold, hard conclusion would be that the UK higher education system, because of the mutual benefits to both of us, is helping the Indian higher education system in capacity building, but we could do more, and the scale is limited, which we have to accept this, by policy issues on both sides, by policy issues that have stood in the way of our longest established trade in students, introduced by the current policy on visas by the current government, but which we're trying to find ways around here in the UK, and also the difficulties that still exist in terms of actually finding the most appropriate ways to strengthen collaboration between the UK and India in India as a consequence of the as yet incomplete reforms of the higher education scene in India itself. So I think we have lots of opportunities, but we have some policy issues in both countries which are bad for both systems and therefore bad for the rate of change at which we can make higher education contribute both to the Indian economy and to further economic and political links between India and the UK. Thanks very much.